She's still laughing.
That's so funny. Welcome to 5 Lemons Left. We're the real stuff, the lemons making lemonade. So pucker up, because we're going to be discussing our life's lessons and the nitty-gritty details of our spiritual journeys.
Hey y'all, I'm Amanda.
And I'm Drusilla.
I'm Melissa.
Hello, this is Morgan.
And I'm Penny. Welcome to our podcast today.
Oh, hello everybody. Welcome back to 5 Lemons Laughing. In case you're new here, this is a podcast about spiritual stuff. We're talking about where we came from, what's going on in our lives, and how we're applying spiritual principles to live a more peaceful life. In today's episode, following on the heels of last week we were talking about the peace of God, losing the peace of God.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. So this week, we're really going to talk about interrupting that fear response, that response that for me, I could just feel it in my spine where I contract down. That's how I react to fear. And everybody, last week, Melissa was talking about she's the opposite. She's an exploder. So we're talking about how to interrupt that. And Morgan is going to start us off with a story, with a success story, and how she got there.
Well, just pondering the peace of God, I was remembering back when it was a little less prevalent in my life, and I spent a lot more time in worry and in fear. And my life feels so different. Not that I'm able to hold on to the peace of God 100% of the time. I totally related to Melissa's story last week, but it's much more prevalent. But I was remembering when, before John Mark and I quit drinking, which has been almost 3 years for me and almost 2 years for John Mark. So woohoo, just going to celebrate that. And before I really started my spiritual study of A Course in Miracles, I used to spend a lot of nights up worrying because he's a musician, he's in a band, he was an active, I don't want to use the label alcoholic, but he had a drinking problem. And he would sometimes be out and not responsive to my text messages and my phone calls. And I'd have to work the next day and be getting in bed and not knowing where he was, what he was doing, when he was coming home, and just wanting a check-in, not trying to be a micro manager or like a hoverer or anything like that. But I come from a family of worriers. It's like, for my parents, it's sort of a love language. And we know as spiritual students that it's actually not very loving to worry. But, that was sort of a love language that was taught to me. And so I took on some of that. And I would just spend all night worrying about worst case scenarios, just fantasizing, not in a good way, about, he's probably in jail right now. Maybe he's at the hospital. Maybe he's in a ditch on the side of the road. Maybe he's run over a family of 5. Like, who knows? Like, just going through these worries and tossing and turning and not getting any sleep at all. And it was a really, really, really uncomfortable way to live. And on top of that, being married to someone with that particular struggle, I worried a lot about outer perceptions, how people saw him, how people saw me, and how he would show up to events and like trying to make excuses for him. I mean, it it was just I'm clenching talking about this, Amanda, going, it was just one stressful, fearful, worrisome thought strung after another. And it was a really uncomfortable, unpeaceful, unpleasant way to be. And I remember one day, probably a couple of years into studying A Course in Miracles and into studying with Jennifer Hadley and the Power of Love Ministry, I remember standing in my kitchen and looking out the window and worrying because I was not able to get in touch with John Mark. And I remember starting to tell those same old stories that, something awful has happened or is going to happen. And I remember the moment that I interrupted it. And I remember it was almost like I had an internal dialogue, and I told the ego, if we want to call it that, I even did it with gratitude. I was like, thank you. I know you're just trying to protect me. You're just doing what you've always done, but we're going to try something different. We don't have to assume the worst. It has never once been the case. And we're going to try just trusting that all is well. And we're going to just distract ourselves. So I just had this moment of recognition that I could choose my thoughts. I didn't have to get carried away by them. And that is such a simple concept, but we're not taught to do that, most of us. And we get identified with our thoughts. So anyway, that was the moment that I recognized that I didn't have to get swept up with them. And I had a lovely rest of the afternoon, and John Mark came home and everything was fine and well. And I remember from that moment forward, even if John Mark was out and I wasn't able to get in touch with him, I put my sleep mask on, I put my earplugs in, and I went to sleep and I slept. I didn't go to work the next day, harried and tired and stressed and clenched and all of that. It just, so that was my shift, I guess. That was my story.
A great story. Can I ask you a question, Morgan, about your story?
Sure.
Something really piqued when you said you learned worry. I'm starting to have conversations about worry. That's how people learned how, to show love. That's showing love is worry. That's so interesting that you said that.
Yeah.
When do you think that you picked up worry as this is how I show love? Not to put words in your mouth, but
Yeah, no, but that you're accurate. I don't know. I mean, just as a little child, even whenever we would get in trouble for something, it would be well, we're just worried about you. So you associate, and there is a certain sense of parents instilling healthy boundaries to show that you are loved. So there is some, but it can go into toxicity. I mean, I remember a girl that I used to work with who would talk about the latest tragedy of an earthquake or a hurricane or something, and all these poor people that were decimated. And she would get so emotionally invested in the story and sobbing. And I sensed, and there's a little bit of judgment in here, I'm just going to be honest, but I sensed that it was look how loving and how much I care and because I'm so upset by this. Yeah. But it actually wasn't helpful. It's not helpful. And you know what I'm saying? But as a society, we're built to see worry as a sign of a measure of love or something. I don't know.
What's the flip side of that? Well, how could a parent be with kids concerned? I mean, I'm really seriously wondering what's the flip side of worry. If we don't want to be worrying about our kids or our spouses or friends or whatever, what do we want to be doing?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I remember my mom always saying your dad is just such a worrier. And I just remember taking that on, like, oh, I'm just like my dad. I'm a worrywart. I'm a worrier. Like, don't mind me. Like, I took that identity on, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, there's got to be some middle ground. I don't know exactly what that looks like or what that would be.
I've always identified with when people talk about worry as you're like running through all the catastrophes that could happen, so that you're always prepared and you're always, you've got it like wrapped up in your mind, it could happen. And I think there's some psychological aspect that if you worry about all those things, then they won't happen, or you'll at least be prepared. My worry, I grew up worrying. I mean, I love what you said. It's like a love language. It was, I don't know if it's a love language in our family, but it's definitely a language. It's definitely a habit. But ours it was more about catastrophizing. Mm-hmm. And like, if you just think of the worst, like just always being prepared, or doom and gloom,
Mm-hmm.
That was
yeah. Well, you think about the society that we live in now, where parents won't let their children out in the yard to play. Well, I mean, we rode our bikes to our, like, all around the neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like, as kids growing up, and like, that's almost unheard of in today's day and age, because people are so worried.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, it's like running through the worst possible scenarios.
Well, and I think the media and other people take advantage of that, because they know we operate on fear. Most people, it means fear or love, right? So here we go back to Course in Miracles, fear or love. And our society is operating on fear a lot.
Yes.
And so love is the pattern interrupter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And fear is false evidence appearing real.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
So Morgan, your story really demonstrated how you let go of that. So like, what were the steps? Like you talked about you're worrying, you were staying up, worrying about him. And then just like you stopped, like you interrupted the patterns. So there had to be a few things that happened right before you were like, boom, I'm stopping the pattern now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's like a lot of time that we spend studying spiritual principle before it actually like gets implemented in our lives. For me, that's been my experience, and definitely a community, or like a group of people that are holding you accountable, like we are fortunate enough to have with each other, can expedite that process. But it took me some time, but there was a certain point where I would remember the spiritual truths, like they would come into my mind in that moment of panic. And I would just pause and be like, oh yeah, I get to choose my thoughts. And it all started because at that point I was having an intentional like morning practice. So I was, starting my day with, setting some sort of intention that I wanted the peace of God, or I wanted Holy Spirit to be in charge of my day. I wanted to make loving choices. I wanted to not be in fear. So, starting the day with that willingness, I think was a big piece of it, and just making myself available to remember to practice what I had been studying. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
I was just in a class today before we started our recording, and we talked about transformation is from the inside out. So what you're talking about, Morgan, is you were working on your insides, and then it could come out in a way that transformed your life. So all your spiritual practices you were doing paid off.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's because it has to happen inside us, has to happen inside me. I have to have that experience, that experiential learning. It's all about our experiences is how we learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the main teachings that helped me was that like our thoughts are not our thoughts. They're just thoughts flowing through the river of consciousness. And we can we can select which ones we latch on to. And we can choose the thoughts we think with God instead of those fear-based ego thoughts. So that was one thing that was tremendously like helpful in shifting for me. And the other thing was the whole law of attraction teachings. Like, I don't want to attract these things that I'm worrying about, and worrying about them is giving energy to them and is therefore attracting them. So that was a huge motivator. And honestly, in some ways, I took that into the fear realm too, like afraid of drawing this unto me. So I had that pendulum had to swing a little bit to come back to like a more centered way of approaching that. But those two, I would say, were the biggest in helping me to let go of.
Thoughts become things. And so be careful what you think about, right?
Yeah. A Course in Miracles says it's hard to believe that your thoughts and beliefs combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. Something like that.
And I think that when you are ready to change those thoughts, it's either just not serving you anymore to do that, or the suffering's too great. Like the suffering to every night think about where your husband is. That's like a behavior that you ultimately want to change because it's painful. Very painful. And you can't do it by making John Mark change, right? Back to what Penny said, it has to be you changing you inside.
Yeah.
Ooh, I got a juicy question. So give us the order of events. So like you quit drinking, you have this epiphany, John Mark stops drinking, you had this epiphany, then you stopped drinking, like, run us down. Where that
okay. So
goes.
no, I had the epiphany probably a couple of years before either of us quit drinking.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's still that there were still plenty of opportunities to worry if I wanted to. I got plenty of opportunities to practice. Not worry.
Yeah. The lesson keeps repeating until we get it, right?
And also, it's so good to hear that, like, would we have these epiphanies when we embrace whatever spiritual practice that we're working on? Sometimes it takes a minute to wind out of your life, right?
Yeah, you want to think like, I'm going to start this spiritual journey in my life. It's going to get so much better. Like all of my problems are going to resolve themselves and it's just going to be sunshines and rainbows.
It reminds me of Drusilla's quote from last week, infinite patience.
Yes.
Something. Finish that.
See it results.
You know what? When it enters my awareness of how long it's been, it's like every time I start to talk about when I first started studying A Course in Miracles, you say, oh, it was 2 years ago. Then it becomes 4. Then it becomes 6. And it's like, in 10 years.
Yeah.
Yes. Beautiful story, Morgan.
Yeah. Who else has a fear pattern that used to haunt them? Maybe.
Oh my gosh, I've got one. So I journeyed to Brazil on a spiritual journey, it was a spiritual journey. That's what it was. Yeah, it was beautiful. And I was partaking in some spiritual surgeries. And when you have the spiritual surgery, it's suggested and recommended. Actually, it's pretty much required. And the guide that I was with, she was very, she really suggested that we follow the guidance. And so I had a spiritual surgery, and you then go get in your pajamas, you go back to your casa, you're in your pajamas, and you lay in bed and sleep and rest for 24 hours. And they bring you your food. You can't talk to anybody. You can't be on any electronics, no nothing, no reading a book, even if it's a spiritual book, no reading, nothing. You just lay and sleep and heal. So that's very hard for Penny. I mean, I'm a fast working woman that's always on the go and has got 20,000 things going. And so I go to Brazil, and I'm told now, I think this was like day 2 or 3 too. We did it very early on. And I'm told to lay down and rest. And, I was told growing up that people die in bed. There's no rest for the wicked, and all these really false beliefs that I've been blowing up one after another. So I lay in bed because I do what I'm told also, especially on my spiritual journey. And especially when somebody that I want what they've got, I listen because I want the healing too. So I'm in bed, and I don't even know how many, it might've been 2 hours into it. Now I have another 22 hours to go, right? And I get this thought, and the thought says, your daughters have died in a car accident. And I went, what? Why? How could have they died in a car accident? This can't be real. And it was just like that crazy thought that started niggling its way into my spiritual healing and telling me, oh, you got to get out of bed, get dressed, go tell the guide that you need to make a phone call home because your daughters are dead, and you need to go find out to make sure that they're not. I am telling you, I sat there and I went, oh, I can't believe it. And then I thought, and it was just like you were saying, Morgan, it's just like something just clicked in me. And I went, hold it. No, this is not my story. I didn't journey all this way to Brazil from California to have my daughters die when I'm gone. No way. That is not my story. And so I had to keep interrupting it because it would just niggle back in again. And it would say, no, it did happen. You better go make a phone call. And I said, no. So 24 hours goes by, and I am like, I survived. It was yeah, I did. But I knew it couldn't be true because I also knew that if they actually did die, somebody would have called, because my husband had the emergency contact number, and they would have come and got me, and they would have told me. So, but 24 hours is up, and I go to our guide, and I said, would it be good? And it was I want to also say it was a very powerful healer that had come in that day to do the spiritual surgery. And so we had to do a lot of other things for like another 24 hours where we were just very calm and very quiet and just continued to allow the healing to occur. But I went to my guide and I said, would it be okay if I make one phone call home? And she said, well, let me just ask you, would it impact you more if you didn't make the phone call or if you did make the phone call? And I went, I think it would impact me more if I did make the phone call. And so I made the phone call, and everybody was healthy and well, and nobody died. And I come from a big family. Somebody's always dying, but nobody died. So it was just like that was like a testimony to me that my false evidence that was appearing so real. And when I was alone with my thoughts, those thoughts that just come in and just want to wipe me out. And it was really a beautiful time for me just to keep saying, no, that's not my story. That's not what I'm about in this lifetime. And they're still alive too. So that's a really good thing. Yeah, they're 29 and 25 now. So anyway, yeah, that was a powerful. I will remember that story with lots of love because I really helped myself interrupt it.
Is it like a magnified version of a underlying pattern of worrying about worst case scenario for them?
Well, yeah. So I've always, I think the moment you have a child, the next thing you think about is what happens if they die. So you just give them life, and now you think, okay, what happens if they die? And so I think I've worried about that. I mean, even to this day, sometimes they'll not be home until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'll go, I wonder if I should look and see where they're at, because we follow each other's location, or do I just have trust and faith? And I go back to trust and faith, and I just trust that everything that's happening is happening for everyone's greatest good, and everybody's healthy and well. And so that's,
So Penny, I'm super curious. What is a spiritual surgery? And you don't have to really go into detail about why you went unless you want to.
Well, interestingly enough, I went with a woman she was coaching me, and she is big in A Course in Miracles. And I was looking for a coach that followed A Course in Miracles. And so she was the first person that I really got into A Course in Miracles with. So a spiritual journey, it's all done in the invisible.
Spiritual surgery.
A spiritual surgery is all done in the invisible. And honestly, when I first got there, I thought, this is a little wonky. But actually, it was so it's just done in the invisible. You sit in a room, and there's people in the room, and I think they were mostly talking in Portuguese because we were in Brazil. And there was probably some English speakers there too. But I mean, it was a room of 100 people, and the spirit is called in, and you've set your intentions when you go in, and you've already let your intentions, you write them on a card, and you put the intention in what you want your healing, what your spiritual healing is that you're looking for. And then whatever that spirit thinks that you need is what you get. And it was really a powerful experience.
Did you remember what your intention was?
I think I wrote it down in one of my journals, but it's always around love and acceptance of myself. I mean, I think that's what I've been searching for a long time, is to love and accept myself and others with no judgments. That's, as a human being, that's probably my hardest thing,
Do you think the more that you love and accept yourself, the easier it is not to worry and have fear about your daughters?
Yes, absolutely. I would say that's a very true statement. I think if I can just accept, I think it's just pure acceptance of life. And then whatever unfolds, because we all know from A Course in Miracles perspective, we're not our body. We don't really ever die. We just slough off this human body. And if we choose, we come back as another one. And so it's like nothing ever, we're energetic beings, and our energy keeps going on and on and on. And so I wonder when we were together before, the 5 of us. Wouldn't that be interesting to know?
Ooh, let's have a past life person on the show.
Yes.
Oh, wouldn't that be fun?
Yes, I say yes.
That would be
Yeah, because we definitely, I'm just claiming, we're a powerful tribe of women. We are.
Yes.
Yeah, all the work we've done as a collective, really amazing.
I just got through watching a show on Netflix called The OA. Have any of you seen it? It's several years old. It's very, very interesting. It's about different dimensions. And so A Course in Miracles talks about, a miracle can save thousands of lifetimes or thousands of years or something like that. Well, this show introduced the concept for me, which I've kind of been aware of, but not really given much thought of. Not only are there lifetimes going in both directions, past and future, hundreds of them, thousands of them. But there's also all of these lifetimes happening at the same time, because every choice point in your life splits off into a different course, a different reality. And so we could be living thousands of lifetimes within this same lifetime, just in other dimensions. And I don't remember how I was going to relate that back to what you were just sharing.
Well, how we've been together before, and maybe even now we're together in another way. Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. So one thing that we did on the show was whenever like you make the decision to move towards somebody in this dimension, it ripples into the other dimensions and you start moving towards that person, in some other form or circumstance. So even if it's in a totally different way, they're your doctor in this life, they're your friend in this dimension, they're your spouse in this dimension, whatever. Anyway.
They're the IRS
really
agent in the next one.
But it was a really interesting show. I really liked it.
Well, that reminds me of the show Everything Everywhere All at Once that won the Academy Award. That's kind of...
I didn't see that.
Oh, yeah, it's an interesting movie too.
I'll add it to my watch list.
Jamie Lee Curtis is in it.
Love her. Well, does anybody else have a fear pattern that used to plague them? Still plagues them?
I learned about a fear pattern while writing, my stories with River, that my fear response is clenching, is whatever that word is I used earlier, that, that holding on, bracing, fear, and I do that when I ride. And Lisa, I just love Lisa. She's who I ride with, my horse, the person that I train with. And she said to me, you clench up a lot. And, and it got me thinking, and it was hilarious. Like one thing good about riding horses is like there's zero ego. Like, I know that I'm a beginner. I have no expectation of going to the Olympics. I'm there to have fun, to connect with my horse. So lessons are easier there because of the zero expectation. Mm-hmm. So we had a chuckle about that. And yes, I do. Like I mentally now have to relax my hips, my thigh, to really relax, because horses can pick up on all that stuff. And when River goes into fear, then I clench, I implode, right? Like I do that. And that escalates, right? That escalates. There's danger. My horse has fear. I show fear. My horse says, oh my God, there's fear. There's more fear. So it's just
so much like Melissa's story last week.
Yes, it is. And so there's a couple things. I'm glad you said that, because not a lot of my lessons, I am at a place in my journey where my lessons are a little bit more gentle, right? So I'm able to look at this and then look at the patterns in the past. And then a couple of days later, it was Sunday morning, and my husband and I went to brunch with some friends, and I'm like, I'm a clencher, and my friend, I love her. She just says it like it is. Her name is Sarah. She's my neighbor. I don't know if she listens, but I'll tell her to listen to this episode. And my husband, they just paused for a minute and they're like, yep, I could see that. And it was hilarious. And then we all just busted hell laughing, right? Again, no ego. I brought it up. My friends are telling me, yes, I can see that. And it was funny, because now I'm noticing it. I don't know when it started for me, fear. So implode. So part of my pattern is hiding in plain sight. So the Melissa was talking, I don't know if it was this episode or last episode, you're an exploder. I'm an imploder.
Fighter.
My husband is an exploder. I'm an imploder. It's that clenching and hiding in plain sight. I don't know when that fear response in me developed, but I implode and I try not to show it to the world. Like I'm just like freeze for a second. That's my response that I am claiming that is unwinding. And it was really nice to have that experience and then start looking backwards and, oh, when did I did that? When did I do that? When did I do that? And Melissa, you put something in our WhatsApp chat that the two really related to me. Like you can't lose weight if you're fearful. What was it? And who said that?
Yeah, there's a doctor. She talks about you can't. The first thing about losing weight is you won't lose weight if your body is in fear, and it is a physiological. It's the fear flight. It's the cortisol that shoots up and remains in your system, and it holds cortisol and fear flight freeze. Hold the pounds on. Your body's not going to shed it if it's trying to protect itself.
So when I read that, and I, because like this happened last week sometime, so I've been contemplating how my body reacts to fear. And then you posted that in the chat about you have to feel safe. And so I have realized that on a very subtle bodies, like very subtle level, that I don't feel safe. So like in my horse world, like hitting the ground, it hurts, right? I don't want to do that. So like that's fear. And also like fear of being seen, fear of being powerful, fear of whatever happened in my childhood that started that response, and how to unwind that moving forward. So lessons with River.
And don't you think that people who, it's, I think there's a fourth one too, they've started to come up with, but fight, flight, freeze. If you go into fight, that's, it's just so obvious, obviously. If you're doing flight, you're taking off or you're withdrawing or you're pulling your love away. That's a little obvious. Freeze.
Disassociating.
Yeah.
Yes. That's
freeze seems to be tricky. Because you can get there and it's not aggressive. You're not bailing, but you probably are completely out of your body, disassociated, but you're stuck. You're just there. And
I have a friend that does that. And when we would get into situations, we were co-chairing something, she would literally say, Penny, if you see me not talking, you know that I froze. Like somebody's triggered me right now. And so I'll need your help at that point. And I knew when we would get into triggered situations, but she would literally, she would say, I know I look really stupid, but I can't do anything. I am frozen. And I've been triggered back to some old childhood trauma, and she couldn't get herself out of it. It was fascinating. I had never really had anybody be that open and honest with me, number one, to let me know that was going on and that she needed my help. But just to experience it was fascinating. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Melissa. You were on a tangent there.
I love that.
Yeah. It's, I wondered if you guys wanted to play with me just a little bit. You want to play?
Sure.
So I'm a PQ coach, and we have some gym exercises.
PQ coaches?
It's positive intelligence quotient. And so we have, you do PQ reps to interrupt the patterns that you are our saboteurs that come into play to wipe us out. So we want to get back to our sage mode where we're in our adult self and we're able to operate. And so when you were talking, Amanda, about tensing up or clenching, which is tensing up, there's this PQ rep that we can do that's called tense and relax. And we're just going to do it for 15 seconds, but usually you do it for a minute or two. But so I want you all to just take a second and then just start clenching up everything from the top of your head, your arms, your shoulders, your back. Just clench every little part of your body. Clench your thighs, clench your legs, clench your toes. fists, everything. Just clench it all up. Just really hold it tight. Don't hurt yourself, but just really hold it tight. Just really clench it up. Feel that tension. And now let it go. And just feel how beautiful when we can let go of all that tension, all that stress, and just feel that. So that's the opposite of clenching, is just to relax and let it go. So I just wanted to have you feel that, the difference.
I love that practice because it's a good mirror for like how we grow spiritually. Like we have to go deeper into the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Relax back out of it, come out of it. I mean,
yeah,
love that.
Yeah. So
I love that.
You can do that anytime.
What a great practice. And I love that our minds are joined, because I was literally going to ask you to lead us in some sort of a practice for managing this clench response. And you read my mind. So that's beautiful.
We are connected.
Anybody have any closing thoughts?
Well, I do have a Penny's Post-it.
Yeah.
Is from the inside out.
Yay.
Yes. Did we have any shout outs this week? Did we already do them?
No, we didn't do them. And I have a friend that, named Maureen who listens. And I just wanted to say, welcome to the family. Thank you for being
Maureen.
Yeah.
Yes, welcome, Maureen.
And I want to shout out to my friend Abby, who's always been one of my greatest cheerleaders and supporters and lovers. And I don't know if she listens to every single episode, but I know that she does listen to some of them. And I'm just grateful for her.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in. We love you. And if you would like more information on any of the things that we talked about today, you can go to our website, and all the details will be there in the description of today's episode. And the website is 5lemonslaughing.com. Be sure to follow us on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram as well. And we will see you again next week.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Have a great week, everyone.